Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad by Emma Rose, illustrated by Mark Schroeder. Good morning, Wareham. How's it going? ELA time, and we're learning it for African American History Month. We're going to learn 3 stories. And then for ELA, on Friday, if you remember, we talked about you're going to write an open response using a quote from each text to show how they're similar or answer the question, essentially. All right, so let's enjoy Harriet Tubman and let's learn about her. What a brave woman she was. And it's really cool. In 2016, she was going to be put on the $20 bill that was voted through, or at least approved by the President Obama at the time. When President Trump took over, he decided to postpone that. He said it wasn't ready yet for certain reasons. And now, with President Biden, it'll probably be put forth and be actually tendered and put out. So that's something to look forward to. Finally having a woman on money instead of just, and an African American as well. So that'll be nice. That'll be on the $20 bill. And we'll learn about Harriet Tubman today, and we'll be learning about Andrew Jackson later. He's another big historical fellow, and he isn't being fully taken off the 20. He's going to be put on the back. So, we're still honoring Andrew Jackson as well. He was certainly a great president as far as influence. It's a very important one. All right, so now let's learn about another great influence and important person, Harriet Tubman, former slave who escaped, and she fought for abolition just like our other two, Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass. But she added a little zip. She ended up freeing over 1,000 slaves, I believe. She helped spy and help the Union soldiers in the Civil War in their fight to end slavery. So it's really interesting. So let's learn about this courageous woman, shall we? Let's learn about Minty. Let me get ready. There we go. It's coming up.
Recordings to accompany Stepping Back in Time.
High Water.
Coronado.
Shanto.
Recordings to accompany Houghton Mifflin Leveled Readers. Copyright Houghton Mifflin Company. All rights reserved.
Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad by Emma Rose, illustrated by Mark Schroeder.
Strategy focus. Harriet Tubman is one of the greatest heroes in our nation's history. As you read the selection, summarize her remarkable story in your own words.
She came into the world as Araminta Ross in Dorchester County, Maryland in 1820 or 1821. No accurate records of her birth exist. Her parents, Benjamin and Harriet Ross, could not read or write or determine the month of her birth. The only way they could tell time was through the passing of the seasons. Baby Minty wasn't really counted as a person when she arrived. Born to enslaved parents, she was already a slave herself. Minty's home was in the Tidewater area of Maryland, near the Chesapeake Bay. Vast plantations of tobacco and other crops brought great wealth to Tidewater planters. Of course, Minty, her parents, and her 10 brothers and sisters could not share in the wealthy lifestyle of the plantation owners. The family lived in a one-room log cabin with no windows. A chimney fire kept the cabin warm, but the inside always smelled of smoke. Still, Minty's family was luckier than many slave families. Their owner allowed them to live together on his Maryland plantation. But when hard times fell, he had to raise money to support his own family, so he rented out his slaves to other plantations. By the time she was 6, Minty, now named Harriet after her mother, was just old enough to work, at least in her owner's mind. Sent away from her family, Harriet lived in various homes, working as a housekeeper, babysitter, cook, and field hand. Harriet, it seemed, could not satisfy her masters. The people for whom she was forced to work complained about her, subjecting Harriet to frequent whippings and beatings. No one, not even Harriet's owner, tried to stop this cruel treatment. To these white people, Harriet was just a slave, a piece of property. She often caught illnesses from the babies she minded and from wading into freezing water to check on muskrat traps. As Harriet herself put it, I grew up like a neglected weed, ignorant of liberty, having no experience of it. When Harriet was 13 years old, an incident changed her life forever. One day, Harriet was in a local store when a young runaway slave attempted to hide there. The young man's overseer yelled to Harriet to grab the runaway and hold him. Though she was afraid of the overseer, Harriet could not turn the young man over to be whipped. Showing the great courage that would mark the rest of her life, Harriet stood in the open doorway, giving the runaway field hand a chance to escape. Harriet paid a heavy price for her heroism. Seeing his slave escape, the furious overseer threw a chunk of iron toward the door. It missed the young man, but struck Harriet solidly in the head, fracturing her skull. It took months for Harriet to recover. A deep scar was not her only reminder of the incident. For the rest of her life, Harriet suffered from severe headaches and sudden sleeping spells. The only good to come out of her injury was that Harriet no longer worked in houses. She began working with her father, who was employed as a skilled lumberman for a shipbuilder. Carrying heavy loads, felling trees, and moving logs suited Harriet physically, strengthening her small 5-foot frame. The work also suited her temperament. When she was in the woods, she felt free, a feeling she loved. Over the next few years, Harriet became such a good worker that the builder began to pay her money. When Harriet was around 24, her life changed again. She married John Tubman, a free man. Although Harriet was married to a free man, she was still enslaved. After hearing the news that her mother had been freed, Harriet hired a lawyer to look into her status. The lawyer discovered that her parents had been freed upon the death of their original owner, but since Harriet had lived her whole life as a slave, she would always be one. This led her to believe that she and her family were wrongly enslaved. 5 years later, after her master died, Harriet heard rumors that she and 3 of her brothers were about to be sold to a plantation owner in the Deep South. The rumors terrified Harriet. For enslaved people like Harriet to be sent to the cotton plantations of the Deep South was nearly the worst possible news. She knew her sudden sleeping spells would not allow her to survive the harsh journey south. She begged her husband to run away to the north, where they could both be free, but he refused to go with her. He didn't want to make trouble. In fact, he threatened to tell her master's widow if she ran away. Suddenly, the rumors proved true. Harriet was about to be sold. With no time to waste, Harriet ran away with her 3 brothers. Running away from slavery required planning and courage. If caught, a runaway slave could be severely beaten or sold. People who helped runaway slaves faced serious dangers of their own. Harriet had vague notions about how to get to the north. She knew that her location in Maryland was approximately 100 miles south of Pennsylvania, a free state. But traveling through woods and across rivers could make the journey longer and more treacherous. All those years spent with her father paid off. He had taught Harriet the ways of the forest and how to find her way through the woods. Harriet learned to find directional clues in nature. For example, to determine north from moss, which grew thickest on a tree's northern side. Traveling by night, Harriet would be guided by the North Star. She would hide in the woods during the daytime and stay off well-traveled roads at night. Shortly after beginning their journey, Harriet's brothers became too frightened to go any further, so they turned back. With only her courage and determination to keep her company, Harriet continued her journey to freedom. On the run, Harriet thought of a white woman who had once offered her friendship. Would the woman take a risk and help Harriet now? What if she showed up at the woman's door? Fortunately for Harriet, the woman was willing to risk her own safety to help the runaway escape. After giving Harriet food and directions to another safe house, the woman set Harriet Tubman on the road to freedom. At great personal peril, other people at houses along the way gave Harriet food and a place to rest. These houses were the stations on the secret route that came to be called the Underground Railroad. Although she was helped along the way by sympathetic people, Harriet made most of her journey alone and on foot. Much of the territory she walked through was swampland and woodland. She had no shelter at night and slept in the woods. Finally, one day in 1849, Harriet approached the Pennsylvania state line. With one step, she left slavery behind. I had crossed the line of which I had so long been dreaming. I was free. Now, Harriet could earn wages of her own. She began to work as a cook in a Philadelphia hotel and saved what money she could. But she wasn't just working for herself. She wanted to help bring others to freedom. In the city, Harriet met William Still, a black man who was in charge of an organization that assisted runaway slaves. This organization was also part of the Underground Railroad. Besides being a route for runaway slaves to freedom, the railroad was also a network of information on the whereabouts of runaways and their families. When she heard that one of her sisters was about to be sold, Harriet's first mission was to bring her sister and 2 children out of slavery and to the North. One person who helped Harriet with her rescue mission was a white man named Thomas Garrett. He was a Quaker, a person whose religion held the belief that slavery was morally wrong. Garrett owned a shoe store where he provided shelter to many runaways, as well as new shoes for their long journey. Many donations from abolitionists or anti-slavery activists were sent to Garrett to fund Harriet's mission. No one seemed able to keep Harriet from bringing slaves to freedom, not even the runaways themselves. Occasionally, runaways would grow fearful and talk about returning to their old homes. Any runaway who returned to the plantation could be frightened or threatened into exposing Harriet and her allies on the railroad. For her safety and theirs, Harriet would not let this happen. She would end all talk of returning by threatening, "Go on or die." The threat was usually all Harriet needed to keep her runaways headed north. For all the chances she took and all the attention she attracted, Harriet was remarkably successful. She often boasted, "I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." Cleverness, determination, and courage kept Harriet Tubman and the slave she guided alive. She used ruses that her enemies did not expect from an escaped slave. Harriet sent coded messages through songs, telling runaways about secret meeting places. She even bought a ticket and boarded a train headed south to throw her pursuers off her trail. Always cool under pressure, Harriet even caused a distraction by setting loose some chickens she had bought. The distraction and a disguise she wore allowed her to escape. Those searching for Harriet were not prepared to match wits with someone as resourceful as she was. In 1850, life became dangerous even for runaway slaves in the North. That was because Congress had passed the Fugitive Slave Act. According to this new, stricter law, federal officials had the right to capture runaway slaves and return them to their owners, even if the slaves now lived in a free state. Anyone who sheltered runaway slaves or who interfered with their capture was a criminal. To get to freedom now, runaways traveled the Underground Railroad all the way to Canada. As part of the British Empire, Canada abolished slavery in 1833. The runaways Harriet Tubman guided to Canada eventually found work as farmers and woodcutters in this new haven. Harriet also relocated her elderly parents there after she found out that her father would go on trial for helping a runaway. However, because her parents disliked the cold Canadian winters, Harriet later resettled them on a small farm she bought in Auburn, New York. From 1850 to 1860, Harriet made 19 trips back to Maryland as a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She successfully guided to freedom at least 60 people, and possibly as many as 300, including her entire family. Her success made Harriet famous. She was known as Moses to the people she led to safety and freedom. Soon posters appeared that offered rewards of up to $40,000 for her capture. Her fame added more danger to an already danger-filled life. In the years before the Civil War, Harriet became a popular speaker at anti-slavery meetings. Her lively stories about slave life and her exploits on the Underground Railroad both appalled and fascinated audiences. She even met John Brown, the anti-slavery activist, and planned to join him on his raid on Harper's Ferry. Harriet was too ill to make the journey, and the plan to start a slave rebellion failed when John Brown and his men were captured and hanged. Once the Civil War began, Harriet volunteered to help the Union Army defeat the pro-slavery Confederacy. Her first assignment was as a nurse in a hospital for displaced slaves whose plantations were overtaken by Union forces. As a scout and a spy, she gathered information from the slaves who fled. Using disguises, Harriet would venture into Confederate territory to gather vital information. On one mission, she helped guide black Union troops on a raid that freed more than 750 slaves. Once the war was over, Harriet Tubman continued to help others. She cared for her elderly parents, took in orphans, and supported the women's rights movement. Even though she had no schooling and was herself illiterate, Harriet helped establish schools for former slaves in the South. In 1903, she bought a large piece of land next to her farm and established the Harriet Tubman Home, which cared for the poor and the elderly. Although she helped the Union Army in many ways, Congress refused to grant her a pension. It wasn't until the death of her second husband, a war veteran, that she was able to receive a widow's pension. In March of 1913, Harriet Tubman died in her Auburn home. She was more than 90 years old. To honor Harriet and her heroic achievements, the citizens of Auburn erected a bronze plaque. On it are words that the abolitionist Frederick Douglass wrote about Harriet Tubman in 1868. Excepting John Brown, I know of no one who has willingly encountered more perils and hardships to serve our enslaved people than you have.
Responding.
All right, so that's Harriet Tubman, and you have a worksheet to do, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.